Hello, everyone. I'm going to keep this short because I'm deathly afraid of public speaking, but I think that this is a good idea that needs to be out there, so I'm going to do my best to present it. Hopefully next time someone else can present this idea on the idea's behalf. My name's Billy. I've been in crypto for a really long time. I started something called Intuition, and what we're doing is we're building towards the trustful interaction layer. And during this presentation, I'm going to explain what the trustful interaction layer means to me and why it's important. So in order to understand the trustful interaction layer, we need to kind of understand the core primitives of Web3 and what we're doing in Web3. So Web3 is kind of rooted in this idea that we should migrate from subjective trust systems to objective trust systems. So instead of needing to do things like rely on humans every step of the way, what if instead we could kind of codify logic and codify rules and have kind of some sort of certainty that the rules would be upheld in the system. So I think that that's like an objectively good thing, and it's kind of a correct design decision for society, or at least it's a powerful tool for us to have in our arsenal. But right now, the Web3 experience is kind of broken. And it's broken for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons I think it's broken is because in the absence of trustful interaction, trustless code is oftentimes a bug and not a feature. So an example of what this means is like, I kind of like to have the ability to reverse charges on my credit card. Or when my identity gets stolen, I like to have someone there who can like help me figure it out. And when we're dealing with objective trust systems, even though they're really great for a lot of things, if we interact with the wrong things, we kind of get screwed. And what we see right now, like the Web3 experience right now is new user comes in, they interact with the wrong things, they immediately get scammed, they lose all their money, and then they're disillusioned and they don't come back for 5 years. Even me, I've been in crypto for over 10 years. Like, I still don't have a lot of trust when I interact with things. And so I interact with like a very limited number of things in Web3 because it's just like, it's not very trustful. Like every step of the way, there's 800 different pitfalls. And so it's really scary. And so if it's scary for me, I can't even imagine what it would be like for someone brand new to the ecosystem. Like they probably don't even know Ethereum exists. They don't know that MetaMask exists, that there's Uniswap, that there's OpenSea. They come in, immediately get phished or something, and just have a horrible experience and then probably never come back. And so like this can't be the experience if we want mass adoption. Like this needs to change. And so what I think we need to do is we have to build this trustful interaction layer. So before you even get to the point of interacting with trustless code, you have to still interact with these subjective trust systems. And this layer of the stack, we can't really make it trustless yet. And so what we have to do is we have to make it trustful. We have to like add more trust instead of removing trust from the equation. Because we like maybe at some point we'll be able to do it, but we can't do it yet. And so what is trustful interaction? So, sorry, coughing. So basically, before you get down to the level of interacting with trustless code, you have to trust a lot of things. And you got to trust people at every step along the way. So you have to trust that you're installing and using the correct software. And then you have to trust the devs of that software. And then you have to trust that that software is free of vulnerabilities. And you have to trust that you're navigating to the correct URLs and interacting with correct and secure smart contracts and buying the right things, whether it's like tokens or products or whatever. And you have to make sure you're getting involved in the right ecosystems and finding the right communities and connections. And so this is like there's so much that needs to happen before you even get to the point of like hitting a smart contract and interacting with trustless code. And we need like way more attention on this layer of the stack. And so how do we make it trustful? Well, we kind of have two options. And it's not really two options, it's kind of a spectrum, but I'll frame the spectrum using the extremes. So on one side, we got like the centralized approach. And the centralized approach is opinionated gatekeepers telling you who and what you can or should interact with. So just like a entirely curated user experience. So let's say you're on like Coinbase mobile wallet and they're like, oh, here's the 5 dApps that you can or should use. Like that probably prevents you from interacting with the wrong things, but it also puts Coinbase in a very strong position of power to kind of curate your Web3 experience, which isn't really what we want in Web3. And so the other extreme is the decentralized approach. And kind of what I think is happening right now, but it's not really structured. So what happens right now is like the social fabric of society kind of tells you what to interact with. And it's like this conversational dissemination of information, and like the data is very unstructured if it even exists in the first place. So it's happening at the conference, and it's happening on Twitter, and you kind of like learn what's going on. You're like, oh, this thing seems trustworthy, so I'm going to interact with that. And I think that where we need to land is somewhere that's kind of in the middle of the two. And it's kind of this happy path that, like, one, kind of allows us to leverage the wisdom of the crowds, but two, also doesn't like give any one person or group too much power. And so there's a lot of things that need to be built at this layer of the stack. But we're focused on three things that I wanted to talk about today. So one is more useful and holistic expression. Two is actual usable data. And then three is a decoupling of data and algorithms from platforms. And I'm going to go into what each of those mean now. So more useful expression. So in order to like interact with the right things, we need data. And the problem is a lot of people aren't expressing a lot of the data that they have stored in their heads. So for example, I've never written an Amazon review. I've never written a Yelp review. I've never done a LinkedIn endorsement. I do 5 stars on Uber every single time because I don't care. And I don't want to box this into being a review thing, but it's like we're not necessarily expressing ourselves all the time. And so if you look at the data, I'm not alone. Like maybe I'm a bad person, but like 97% of people aren't actively contributing data to these platforms. And then conversely, we all use this data to make decisions almost every day. It's like even me as someone trying to solve this problem, I still go to Amazon and I'm still like, oh, 5 stars, 10,000 reviews. Obviously, I'm going to buy this one. Or 5-star restaurant versus 3-star. Of course, I'm going to go to the better rated restaurant, even though I know the data's flawed because no one that I know does these things. And so, like, what we need to do is get people to express themselves more because the data exists. It just exists in our heads. Because if you come to me and you ask me about a product I've bought and used or a restaurant I've been to or a person I've worked with, I can tell you about them, but we have to have a conversation. Like the data doesn't exist on the web, and that's not very efficient. And so that's kind of like one piece of the expression problem. And then the other piece is our expression is limited by the games that we're playing on the web. And I use the term game very loosely, but it's like in Twitter, you know, the algorithm is the algorithm, and the actions I can take is I can heart things, and I can repost them, and I can comment. So I'm limited to those actions. And that's like one of the only platforms I use on the web right now. So my like expression on the web is just like very limited. And it's not necessarily like representative of my holistic inner state or my holistic inner knowledge. And so I think what we need to do is kind of incentivize people in different ways to express themselves a little bit more, to take this information that maybe only lives in their heads right now and get it out there into the digital realm for other people to discover, and do it in ways that's like positive sum. So I think the games that are created right now that people are interacting with oftentimes have perverse incentives that results in like the non-true reputation of the person being expressed online. And so simple example is, okay, I'm using Midjourney and I've just prompted Midjourney for 10,000 intuition logos. Like that doesn't mean that the only thing I think about is intuition logos. But to Midjourney, it thinks the only thing I care about is intuition logos. But that isn't the case, obviously. Or let's say I put $10 million into some DeFi farm. Like, I'm maybe not signaling that I trust the team or the protocol or believe in it long term. I might just be farming yield for a couple of days, and then I'm out of there. So, like, we don't have this granular expression of what's actually going on in our minds. And I think we need a little bit more of that. So that's step one. Step two is, okay, now we got people expressing themselves. What format do we capture the data in? Like, how do we make the data actually usable? Like, sure, AI is making dealing with unstructured data a lot easier, but it's still kind of messy. And so there's two, I think, big things that we need to solve here. So the first is the identity problem. So everything has so many disparate digital identifiers. Like we as people, we have hundreds. Every new app we sign up for, we create a new identity for that context, and then we generate data and reputation that only lives within that context. So I can't take my 5-star Uber reputation and rent an Airbnb. I can't take my 20-year reputation with Bank of America and open a Wells Fargo account or get an under-collateralized loan in DeFi. It just seems crazy. But it's not just people. So let's say I want to create some verifiable data or create an attestation about Ethereum itself. Like, what is the unique identifier I use to reference Ethereum in my attestation? Is it the website? Is it the Twitter profile? Is it the LinkedIn? Like, I actually don't know right now. And in Web3, it's kind of nice because we all have these self-sovereign private keys that resolve to addresses. Some of us have like public-facing ENS addresses. So it's like, okay, you want to make an attestation about Billy, or you want to attach some data to me. You attach the data to billy.eth, and it's amazing. And the thing doing the attesting also has an address. And so it's very clean. And so what we need to do, I think, is arrive at what the globally persistent canonical identifiers for all things are going to be. And the way that we do that is through social consensus. So for example, how do we arrive at what the globally persistent canonical identifier is for Pepe coin? Like there's 10,000 Pepe coins. Which one's the canonical Pepe? And the answer is the market decides. Like all the Pepe coins might look exactly the same, but it's what the crowd has said is the canonical Pepe. That's the Pepe. And so I think we have to extrapolate that concept out to the identities of all things so that we can arrive at what the identifiers we are going to use to reference those things are going to be. Once we have those identifiers, then we can start attaching data to them. When we go to attach data to the identifiers, then we need the data to be clean. And so how do we get clean data that everyone can work with? And so the answer kind of to date has been like standards committees and standards hell, which everyone hates. It doesn't really work. You get in a room, you argue for 5-10 years, and maybe arrive at a conclusion. But I think what we're really good at in Web3 is social consensus. And so what if instead of like top-down hierarchically imposed taxonomies, we built this like bottom-up incentivized folksonomy, and we let the market decide on how to structure the data. And we kind of like incentivize people to converge on specific ways to structure their data. So you don't really have to like argue at the table. You just kind of do what's best personally for you, and what's best personally for you is also what's best for the system. So I think if we could build a system that does that, that would be pretty cool. So we're doing that. So that's number one. So first, we got people expressing the data. The data is being attached to canonical identifiers for things. The data is now structured. Now the question becomes, where do we store the data? Do we store it in Twitter servers? Do we store it on Amazon servers? Probably not. So what we next need to do is we need to decouple data and algorithms from platforms. So what if instead of all the data living in the silos of the applications, we had this like single unified verifiable data lake that all applications were pushing data to and all applications were reading data from. Then like every app could very easily leverage the data of every other app. So example of this is right now, when I go to interact with Twitter, I'm interacting with Twitter data and the Twitter algorithm. I can't like opt into using other data, and I can't opt out of the Twitter algorithm and toggle to something else. I have to like use their stuff. But I would love to be able to toggle to a different algorithm, or I'd love to be able to toggle to, if I'm arguing with a flat earther, I'd love to like toggle to see their feed, and maybe the reason they think the earth is flat is because their whole feed is an echo chamber of people saying the earth is flat. So that's kind of like one of the reasons why I think this is important. And then the other is if we decouple the data and algorithms from the platforms, then the platforms become less entrenched and there's less vendor lock-in, because I don't really want to leave Twitter or something like that, because I've spent a lot of time and energy and attention kind of building up my data and my reputation, reputation and my following over there. And so even if there's better user experiences elsewhere, I don't even get to try them out because I'm just never going to leave Twitter. And so it doesn't leave room for experimentation. And so that's kind of happening in decentralized social right now. But I think like the more experimentation we have at the application layer, the better our interactions are going to be. So that's kind of the third thing. So, okay, now the data exists online. It's structured properly. It's stored in some neutral place. It's available to everyone. Like, now what? Now, how do we get to the original concept of trustful interaction? First, what I think we got to do, you got to establish your trust graphs. You can have one trust graph, or you can have many granular contextual trust graphs. So you could say, okay, in the context of Web3, here's the agents in the system that I trust. Or you could say, on the topic of supplements, here's the people I trust. Or restaurants, or books, or podcasts, or movies, whatever. You can get as granular as you want. But just like defining these contextual trust graphs, then once you have them, you can pick your algorithms. And you can take both of these things wherever you go. So it's like, okay, maybe the algorithm I want to choose is the eigentrust algorithm. And I say, okay, my trust graph is here, and I'm going to weight people who are 1 degree of separation away from me 100%. And people who are 2 degrees of separation away from me 60%. And 3 degrees of separation away from me 20%, whatever. So just like picking and choosing the way that you want to filter the data now that you got your trust graphs. And then third is bringing your trust graphs and your algorithms and all of the data with you wherever you go, so that when you go to interact with something, you're served with all of the data you need when you need it. So instead of the user experience of interacting with MetaMask right now being presented with a bunch of non-human readable jargon, what if you could like see what your intuition was saying about the contract you're interacting with? And it's like, okay, the people that I trust in the context of smart contracts are the auditing firms. And it's like, okay, QuantStamp and Trail of Bits and Consensus Diligence have all said that this thing is audited or secure. So now I've got a little bit more trust when I'm interacting with this contract. I have a little bit more confidence. And you can kind of just extrapolate that out to anything. So let's say you're on Amazon and you're buying a product. Right now, you don't have an Amazon friends list. And so what you see when you go to the reviews is 10,000 reviews from people you don't know. Like, I've never clicked on a profile. But what would be really cool is if we could overlay that data with trust graph of your choosing, or the algorithm of your choosing, or both. And it's like, okay, I'm shopping for supplements, and I trust Dr. Huberman in that context, and he is saying that he recommends this supplement. Great, I don't have to go and listen to 8 podcasts to kind of decipher what supplements he likes. The data is now being presented to me at the point of interaction, which is just way more efficient. And so the end result of all of this is just trying to give people better decision-making power when they go to interact with things, instead of kind of being in the dark and kind of being scared, especially in Web3 when it can have kind of dire and catastrophic consequences because you can just lose all of your money at any moment. We just kind of need to have more information when we're interacting with things. And so what this resolves in is kind of this more holistic trust stack. So I don't think you can read those little words. Sorry, but we got execution and consensus and storage, and I think there's this whole other layer on top of those. That's the interaction layer. It's like, okay, before you even get to the point of touching trustless execution or consensus or storage, you have to interact with things, and we just need to bring more trust to that interaction layer so that we're not interacting with the wrong things. That's pretty much it. I'm Billy. We're Intuition. We're doing this. If you want to talk, we're around. We also got a booth. 506 is near the entrance. And yeah, that's my time. Thank you all.